Have you ever met someone who changed your life without even trying? Like, really think about it. Has a complete stranger ever walked into your world and made you question everything you thought you knew about love, worth, or connection? I want you to stop what you're doing for just a moment and imagine this with me. You're a billionaire. You have everything money can buy: power, respect, the biggest house on the block. But none of that helps when your own daughter, your blind, fragile little girl, is learning how to walk again after a car accident that you blame yourself for. Now picture this. You pull up to her rehab center one quiet afternoon. Birds chirping, wind chimes swaying gently in the garden breeze, sunlight filtering through the trees. And there she is, your daughter, smiling, laughing, holding the hand of some man in grease-stained coveralls. Not a doctor, not a therapist, just a mechanic. He's guiding her, one step at a time, like he's been there for years, like she belongs with him. And the way she clings to his voice, like he is the safety she's been searching for, not you. That's the moment everything inside me cracked. Now, before I go deeper, I have to ask you something. Would you trust a stranger with the one thing you love most in this world? Could you open your heart, even just a little, if it meant healing a part of yourself you didn't know was broken? Type in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story is traveling. And if you're someone who feels things deeply, if you believe in stories that pull you in, twist your heart, and maybe even stay with you long after they end, hit that subscribe button. This is Mr. Alex Stories, and here we don't just watch stories, we live through them together. Oh, and one last thing before we dive in. If you love these kinds of real, raw, emotional journeys, type 1 in the comments. But if this isn't your vibe, that's totally okay. Type 0 so I know to bring you something different next time. All right, let me take you back to that garden, where the sun was warm, the wind was soft, and a quiet black mechanic named Jeremiah was about to change everything I thought I knew about being a father. Forever. At first, I didn't think much of him. He was just another guy in coveralls, doing his job, fixing the staff vehicles, tinkering around the back of the rehab center. That's all he was, just a mechanic. He didn't make any grand entrance or try to stand out. He didn't demand attention. He simply did his work. But then I noticed something that caught me off guard. A soft smile when he'd look over at my daughter, and the way his eyes would follow her even when she wasn't looking. There was something about the way he moved, the calmness in his manner, the way he seemed present. It wasn't like anyone else around here. And trust me, I noticed the people around here. But him? He was different. There was a gentleness in him I couldn't quite place. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else. He'd show up every day, quietly slipping in and out of the rehab center, always hanging around the garden. And that's when I saw it. One day, when I was watching from the window, just a bit too long, I saw him kneeling down next to my daughter. She was struggling again with the simplest of steps, her cane tapping the ground like a rhythm she couldn't quite catch. I had watched her do this for weeks, trying so hard, falling over, standing back up, only to stumble again. And there he was, standing beside her, watching her struggle. "Mind if I walk beside you?" His voice was soft, but there was something about it that made my daughter stop in her tracks. She turned, her expression uncertain. Not in fear, but in that hesitant, cautious way only someone who's been through too much can show. And then, she nodded. They walked together, slowly at first, just two figures moving across the garden, side by side. I could see her laughing softly at something he'd said, probably about one of the engines he was fixing. She always loved how things worked. And he listened. He listened to her in a way I hadn't seen anyone listen to her in a long time, like he mattered, not just her blindness. What really got me, though, was when she spoke, with that innocent grin of hers. "You make walking feel like flying, Mr. J." That's what she called him. Mr. J. I never told him, but hearing her say that name, I felt something inside me shift. I don't know what it was, but I didn't like it. I'd spent years building this empire, years of working hard for everything I had. I had a daughter I was supposed to protect, to take care of, and yet here was this man, someone I barely knew, making her laugh, making her feel something again. And that's when I realized he was more than just a mechanic, more than just a man who fixed cars and occasionally helped out with the rehab equipment. He was helping her walk again. He was showing her that there was more than just darkness. He was giving her something I couldn't: hope. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but I found myself watching them. Every day. From a distance, I'd see them out in the garden. I'd see them talking, her voice light and easy, his low and steady. There was something so natural about it. No pretense, just two people getting to know each other. It wasn't forced. It wasn't something they planned. It was simply a connection, growing in the most unexpected of places. I wanted to pull her away sometimes, to step in and ask if everything was okay. But I never did. I didn't know what to say. What right did I have to interrupt their moments? Was it jealousy that gnawed at me, or something deeper I didn't want to face? Maybe it was both. I'll admit it did bother me at first, the way he made her smile, the way she trusted him so easily. But there was also a part of me that couldn't help but feel a pang of admiration. How could I not be impressed? How could I not recognize that he was doing something I had failed to do for so long? One afternoon, as I was walking into the center, I overheard them talking. "Mr. J," she said, looking up at him with those big, trusting eyes, "how do you know all these sounds? How do you tell when something's broken?" He chuckled softly, that easy, comfortable laugh of his. "It's like music, kid. Every engine has its own rhythm. You listen close enough, and it tells you everything." She laughed at that, almost as if she'd never considered that her world could be more than silence and shadows. She felt heard in a way she hadn't before. I don't know why, but I stood there, frozen for a moment, watching, listening. Was this what it meant to really care for someone? Was I missing something all these years? Did I even know how to connect anymore? But there was no denying it. Every day that passed, I could feel it. Their bond. It was quiet. It was small. But it was real. And something inside me, something deep down, I couldn't pull away from it. For the first time, I started to question my own place in my daughter's life. Did she need me as much as I thought? Was I enough? And Jeremiah? There was more to him than just the mechanic who fixed engines. There was something more. And no matter how hard I tried to push it out of my mind, there it was, like an unspoken promise hanging between us. Something undeniable had begun to grow. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I knew that much. I had everything under control, or so I thought. I was the one who made the decisions. I was the one who provided, the one who protected. But when I started looking forward to seeing him, Jeremiah, something inside me shifted. It was probably nothing. Just a passing thought, right? But still, every time he showed up, I found myself anticipating it, waiting for that moment when I could see him walk through the door, always so unassuming, never demanding anything from anyone, just there. He wasn't like the men I knew, the men I called friends, the ones I'd done business with, the ones who had money to burn and the power to back it up, the ones who spoke in words of ambition, success, and status, men who wore their wealth like a shield, who held their worlds at arm's length. But Jeremiah? He didn't care for any of that. When I watched him, the way he listened to my daughter with such genuine patience, something in me tightened. There was a sincerity in his eyes that I didn't often see in anyone, let alone men who played in the circles I did. He wasn't distracted by anything other than her. His focus was all on her, on helping her, making her feel heard and safe. Something so simple, yet so incredibly rare. And when he smiled at her, it wasn't just a smile, it was something deeper. It was a quiet acknowledgement that she wasn't broken, that she wasn't just the victim of an accident. She was someone with strength, someone who deserved to stand tall again. But then, when his gaze shifted, even just for a moment, and landed on me, something shifted again. What was that look? A smile. Warm. Understanding. But also, something else. Something that I couldn't quite name. It was as if he saw something in me too, some hidden part of me that I didn't even know existed. A small, fleeting moment. But in that moment, I felt a knot in my chest. A strange, unfamiliar feeling. It couldn't be jealousy. Could it? No. That didn't make sense. It was probably nothing. Just my mind playing tricks, right? But deep down, I knew better. I found myself asking the staff about him. Jeremiah? He's here every weekend. Volunteers his time. Doesn't ask for a thing. Just shows up. Always in the background. Never seeking attention. They all spoke about him with this quiet admiration, like he was some kind of gentle force that simply belonged in the space. And I realized something then. I had never once asked anything about him. I had never thought to. Why would I? He was just a mechanic. He was just helping out. Nothing more. But still, I couldn't shake it. This quiet tug inside me. The way he moved. The way he was. Then, one afternoon, while I was sitting with my daughter in the garden, she said something that caught me off guard. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft but curious. "Do you think Mr. J could come over for dinner sometime?" The words hit me harder than I expected. I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my lips, but inside, I felt something stir. Something unsettling. Dinner? Why dinner? What was this really about? "Dinner, huh?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, even though my heart rate had quickened. She nodded eagerly, her little hands folding in her lap as she spoke. "He's been so nice to me. I think it would be nice if he could come and eat with us sometime. What do you think, Daddy?" My daughter, sweet, trusting, innocent, had no idea what was swirling inside me. She was just excited about the idea of sharing a meal with someone who had been kind to her, a small thing to her, a huge thing to me. I smiled at her. "I'm sure Mr. J would love that, sweetie." But even as I said it, the words tasted different than I expected. They felt off. It wasn't that I disliked Jeremiah. Quite the opposite, in fact. He had been nothing but kind to my daughter. He had been a steady presence when I had no idea how to be one. He had given her something I couldn't. A chance. But why did this small, simple request feel so complicated? I didn't want to acknowledge it, but the truth was undeniable. There was something about Jeremiah that pulled at me, in ways I didn't want to admit, in ways I couldn't control. I couldn't help but feel like a fool for even considering it. I couldn't help but wonder if this was something more, something beyond the realm of simple kindness or connection, something deeper, something dangerous. But I wasn't the type of man who lost control. I never let emotions rule my decisions. I was a father, a businessman. But here I was, caught between wanting to protect my daughter and feeling something I couldn't quite understand. It was all starting to unravel, slowly, and I was only beginning to realize that the threads tying us together, my daughter, Jeremiah, and myself, they were far more tangled than I could have ever imagined. The rain came down like it had all the time in the world. It wasn't just any storm. It was the kind of rain that soaked through everything, relentless and cold, as if the sky had its own secrets to spill. I could hear it tap against the roof of the rehab center, the sound filling the quiet halls. But the real storm, the one I couldn't escape, was brewing inside me. My daughter had a fever, a high one, and I stayed that night. Of course, I stayed. She was all I had left, and if there was one thing I was sure of, it was that I would always be there for her, even if I didn't know what I was doing half the time. She slept fitfully, her body racked with chills, her brow damp with sweat. I sat by her side, watching, waiting for the fever to break. My mind kept drifting, though. Not to her, to him, Jeremiah. For the first time since this whole thing had started, I couldn't ignore the way I kept thinking about him, the way his presence lingered even when he wasn't there. But tonight was different. It was late, probably past midnight, when I went to check on her one last time before the nurses took over for the night. I walked down the quiet hallway, past the faint smell of antiseptic and old wood. The soft sounds of rain became louder as I stepped outside. That's when I saw him. Jeremiah, sitting in the pouring rain, soaked to the bone, staring out at the empty garden. He was alone, his face strained, a worry I hadn't seen before etched across his features. He didn't notice me at first. His eyes were fixed somewhere in the distance, his hands gripping the sides of the bench. I felt a pang in my chest. Something about seeing him like this, vulnerable, exposed, without the usual confident calm, hit me harder than I expected. I should have asked him to leave, told him he was needed inside, that he had no reason to stay out here, that it wasn't his responsibility. But I didn't. Instead, I walked over, slowly, like I was walking through water, dragging my feet through the suffocating air. And then I sat beside him. Close. Too close, maybe. The bench wasn't made for two, but we both fit. The space between us didn't feel uncomfortable, though. It felt necessary, like an inevitable thing. The quiet felt like a bond that had formed without permission. And here we were, both of us unable to pull away. I had no words. He didn't either. There was just the sound of the rain, tapping on the roof above, softly at first, and then louder. It almost felt like we were in a different world, just the two of us, in this small, damp corner of reality. A world that didn't care about money or status or the things I should have been focused on. It didn't care about what I was running from. It only cared about this moment. The tension was thick like fog, and it wrapped itself around us, making it harder to breathe. And yet, I didn't want to move. I glanced at him, at the way his soaked clothes clung to him, his tired eyes, his hands folded in his lap as if waiting for something he couldn't name. He looked lost, more than I'd ever seen before. And I felt this strange pull, like I could be the one to help him, to take him out of this storm, the same storm that had already made its way into my own chest. But I didn't say a word. Neither of us did. And then, in the quietest of moments, I felt it. The soft, almost imperceptible stir of my daughter's voice coming from inside the building. She wasn't awake, but she murmured something in her sleep. "Mr. J," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I felt my stomach twist, and I looked back at Jeremiah. His eyes were closed now, like he had heard her too. For a moment I thought I saw his jaw tighten, a flicker of something passing over his face, something I couldn't name. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. The weight of it all, the silence, the rain, the way my daughter had called for him in her sleep, felt unbearable. I swallowed hard. I shouldn't have been sitting here this close to him, sharing this moment. But I was. And the feeling didn't go away. It was then that I felt it, that unspoken shift. A shift I hadn't been ready for but couldn't ignore. As I sat there, time stretched. And in that stretch I realized that everything was changing. My daughter's life, my life, and now, somehow, his life. The more I tried to push it away, the clearer it became. I couldn't untangle the mess of feelings inside me. The guilt, the confusion, the longing. I didn't know it then, but that was the night everything began to unravel. The night when the fog outside wasn't the only fog I was walking through. That night, I saw something I couldn't turn away from. And later, when I finally went to bed, exhausted and restless, I dreamt of walking through thick gray fog. I could barely see the path ahead, but there, on the other side, stood Jeremiah, waiting, silent, patient. I reached out to him, but before I could speak, I woke up. The cold sweat on my brow wasn't from the dream. It was from the realization that this thing between us, whatever it was only just beginning. And that, despite all my efforts, I couldn't stop it anymore. The days after that night felt like slow-moving shadows. I couldn't escape the weight of what had happened, the way the rain still lingered in my thoughts, even when the sky had cleared. There was something about Jeremiah that had shifted inside me, something that gnawed at the edges of my control, pulling at the fabric of the life I'd spent so carefully stitching together. So, I did what I always did when I was scared. I pulled away. I skipped visits. I made excuses, meetings, phone calls, things that kept me away from the center longer than I needed. I told myself I was just being responsible, that I was busy, professional. But the truth was, I couldn't face him. I couldn't face the quiet, unspoken tension between us that had built without either of us daring to acknowledge it. And as the days passed, I found myself leaving the rehab center earlier and earlier. not staying to check on my daughter's progress as much, not sticking around to see Jeremiah, even though I knew he'd be there, as steady and reliable as always. It should have felt like relief, but it didn't. At home, when the silence of the empty house pressed down on me, I could still feel his presence like a shadow at the edge of my peripheral vision. His calm demeanor, his quiet strength. It was unsettling in a way I couldn't name. I kept telling myself it wasn't right to feel what I felt, that it wasn't fair to either of us. But no matter how many times I convinced myself, I couldn't escape the fact that I didn't want to walk away from him. I didn't want to create distance. I didn't want to be the man who avoided what was right in front of him, but I did anyway. The guilt settled in like a thick fog. Each day that passed without a visit felt like a betrayal, both to my daughter and to myself. And yet, I couldn't go back. I couldn't face it. I was torn between the life I'd built, the control, the wealth, the rules, and this thing inside me that longed to break free. It was easier to just avoid it. But she noticed. Of course, she noticed. "Daddy," my daughter said one afternoon, her voice soft and confused, "why don't you talk to Mr. J anymore? Did I do something wrong?" Her words were like a slap, but not in the way I expected. There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness. Only the quiet hurt of a little girl who didn't understand what had changed, and it crushed me. I could feel my chest tighten, my throat constrict. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that everything was fine. But that wouldn't be true. So instead, I said nothing. Her face dropped a little, but she didn't press me. She didn't argue. She just turned away, her small hands fiddling with the corner of her blanket. But it was there. That look. The same one I saw every time I tried to push Jeremiah away. The look of someone who was waiting for something they weren't sure would come. It hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't just avoiding Jeremiah. I was avoiding her. I was avoiding the one thing that made everything in my life real. The only reason I had been able to convince myself for so long that I was doing the right thing. That night, I didn't sleep much. I could hear the sound of her soft breathing from across the hall, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. All I could think about was how I'd built this wall between us, how I'd let my own fears control me, all while ignoring the person who needed me the most. The next morning, I thought about going to see her, to apologize. But the closer I got to the rehab center, the more my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I found myself parking the car and just sitting there for a long time. And that's when I saw him. Jeremiah. Standing by the garden, his hands deep in his pockets, his head down. I didn't mean to notice, but I couldn't look away. He looked up then, and our eyes met. I could see it in his expression. He wasn't angry, but there was something there, something unspoken. He was waiting for me to make the choice, waiting for me to see what I couldn't allow myself to admit. But I couldn't move. I couldn't do it. I broke the stare first and turned away, heading inside, pretending like I didn't just feel the weight of everything shift again. I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung to me, like a stain I couldn't wash out. Later that day, when I went to check on my daughter, she wouldn't walk with anyone else. "I'll wait for Mr. J," she said, her voice small but firm. Her eyes, innocent but full of something I couldn't quite put into words, told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't forgotten. She was waiting for him. And that's when I realized something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just me who was caught in this struggle. It was all of us. But I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it right. I wanted to, but I wasn't sure if I even knew what right meant anymore. It was one of those nights when the world outside felt like it was falling apart. The storm came on suddenly, fierce and unrelenting, turning the night sky into a jagged mass of black and silver. The power flickered, then went out completely, leaving the rehab center cast in shadows and silence. The staff sent everyone home early, but I stayed behind, of course. The rain battered against the windows, and the howling wind added to the already tense air in the building. My daughter was fast asleep nearby, her small body curled in the blanket I'd tucked around her. The storm didn't seem to bother her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was about to change. Jeremiah was still there, of course. He didn't leave. As always, he remained just present, silent, as if he belonged to the darkness, moving through it like it didn't even touch him. The storm outside had an almost eerie quality, matching the chaos that had been growing inside me. I tried to focus on my daughter, watching her sleep, but my mind kept wandering back to him, to Jeremiah. And then, it happened. He was standing in the doorway of the hallway, leaning against the frame. The soft glow of the candlelight flickered in his eyes as the shadows moved across his face. "Power's out," he said, his voice low, careful. "I thought I'd check in. If you need anything?" I didn't know what it was that made me turn to him then. Maybe it was the way the darkness seemed to close in around us, or maybe it was the quiet understanding in his eyes, like we both knew what was happening, but neither of us could say it. Instead, I just nodded. "Thanks, Jeremiah." I could feel the weight of the words between us, hanging there in the quiet, like we were both waiting for something. Waiting for the storm outside, or the one inside of us, to settle enough for us to speak. But neither of us said anything for a long moment. Just the steady drip of the rain, the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance, the soft sound of my daughter's breathing, peaceful and innocent, in the next room. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice low but steady, as if he had rehearsed these words in his head 1,000 times. "I know I don't belong in your world," he said, and there was something raw in his voice. "But she's not just a patient to me. She saved something in me I thought I'd lost." I didn't move. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't know what to say. But then, I heard myself speak, my own voice shaking, like I was trying to hold something back that was breaking free. You remind me what it means to care." I swallowed hard. Not for what someone can do, but for who they are. There. I'd said it. The truth that I had been running from for days, weeks, maybe even months. The truth that I didn't know how to live with. I looked at him then, and for the first time I saw the full depth of what was between us. No, not between us, inside us. The way we were connected, not by circumstance, not by our roles, but by something deeper. Neither of us was expecting it, and neither of us wanted it. But there it was, the weight of what we felt, neither of us knowing what to do with it. There was no physical gesture, no touch, no reaching across the space between us, though the silence between us was loud enough to be a physical thing in itself. It was just the rawness of our emotions hanging in the air, both of us trembling in the face of it. Jeremiah stood there, his eyes searching mine, waiting for me to react, to say something more. But all I could do was look at him. Look into the man who had started to unravel everything I'd built. Everything I thought I understood. And I felt it then. The flood of emotions I had been keeping at bay. The guilt, the fear, the shame. But also something else. Something that terrified me because it felt so real, so honest, that it threatened to consume me. Jeremiah didn't move. He didn't try to fill the silence. He just stayed there, still waiting for whatever this was to unfold. And in that moment, I realized something that broke me. I wasn't just watching a stranger take care of my daughter anymore. I wasn't just witnessing someone else's kindness. I was feeling it. I was experiencing it. Through my daughter, through him. And that scared me more than anything. Because the truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what I wanted. But standing in that dim hallway, the storm raging outside with him so close and yet still a world away, I understood one thing. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep denying what was happening between us, what I was feeling, what he was feeling. But how could I say that? How could I make it real? And before I could say anything else, Jeremiah spoke again, his voice even softer than before. "I don't know where this goes," he said. "I don't know what happens next. But I know one thing." He paused, the words heavy. "I'm not walking away from her. From you." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, and I didn't know what to do with them. How could I? How could I look at him, at us, and know that everything had changed in the span of a single confession? "I'm not walking away either," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm outside. But those words, those simple, raw words, were like a seed planted in the middle of a storm. I didn't know what would grow from them, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The decision wasn't an easy one. But then, nothing about the past few weeks had been easy. I had spent days, no, weeks, wrestling with myself, trying to find a way to keep everything in place, to keep my daughter's world safe and stable, while also holding on to the illusion of control I'd so carefully constructed around my life. But everything had unraveled, every single thread of it. And Jeremiah. Jeremiah had been the cause. Not because he wanted to break anything, but because he made me feel things I'd long buried under the weight of wealth, power, and my own carefully crafted emotional distance. I knew what I had to do. I had to step back. Step away from the source of this chaos, this pull, this connection that scared me in ways I couldn't fully explain. I packed up my daughter's things quietly, telling her it was for her own good. A new place, a better place, somewhere she could heal more, could be more. But as I packed her small suitcase and folded her favorite blankets, I felt the weight of it all. Every choice I was making felt like a betrayal, a choice that would forever mark this moment as the last one I would ever have with Jeremiah. I didn't know if I was doing this for my daughter's future or for mine. Maybe it was both, but it didn't make it easier. I had arranged for a transfer to an elite facility in Europe, somewhere far away, far from everything that had started to feel like home, far from everything I had started to fear. I left the note with the staff, just a simple sentence. The kind of thing you write when you know something is too complicated to explain, but you still feel like you owe it. Tell Jeremiah thank you for giving her her wings back. I didn't even know what that meant. It felt like something I was supposed to say, something I had to say to make this feel like it mattered. But in reality, it didn't matter. Nothing would change what had happened between us. Nothing would change the way he had made me feel, the way he had made me remember what it was like to care. Not just for my daughter, but for someone who made me vulnerable. I didn't want to look back. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did. I stood in the car, staring out through the rain-spattered window, watching him, watching Jeremiah. He was there, just like always, guiding another patient through the rain. His movements were so smooth, so practiced, like he knew exactly how to navigate the world, even when it was dark and stormy. I couldn't hear the words they exchanged, but I didn't need to. I saw the way he smiled, the way he guided that patient, gently, carefully, just like he had done with my daughter. And it hit me then, hard, like a punch to the gut. The thing I had been avoiding for so long. I had trusted him. I had trusted him with something I didn't even know I had left to give. And now I was walking away from it. I wasn't just leaving a rehab center. I wasn't just sending my daughter off to another place. I was leaving him behind. I was leaving the connection we shared, leaving the possibility of something more behind. I was leaving everything that could have been. I didn't know if I was making the right choice. I didn't know if I was running away from something real or protecting myself from a truth I wasn't ready to face. But in that moment, I made the decision. I would never see him again. Not like this. Not in this life. The rain kept falling. The world outside kept turning, indifferent to the decisions I had made. I wiped my eyes quickly, trying to ignore the heaviness in my chest. I told myself it was for the best, that this was the only way to protect my daughter, to protect us all. But as I watched him guide that patient through the storm, I couldn't help but feel that I was leaving a part of myself behind. The last glimpse of Jeremiah was a silhouette in the rain, moving forward, just like always. And I stayed still, watching, knowing it would be the last time I ever saw him. Maybe it was right, maybe it wasn't. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same. And that was the price I had to pay for walking away. Weeks passed, each day blurring into the next. My daughter settled into her new life in Europe, adjusting to the quiet routine of the elite facility. She was healing, yes, but I could never shake the weight of what I'd left behind. There was a part of me that kept replaying the days, the moments, and especially him, Jeremiah. I had told myself it was the right decision, that it was necessary. But some nights, in the silence of my empty house, I wondered if I had done the right thing at all. Then, one morning, A letter arrived. At first I thought it was just another piece of paperwork, but when I saw the handwriting on the envelope, I froze. My heart, despite everything I had done to suppress it, skipped a beat. It was from him. Jeremiah. The letter was simple, just a single line, but it hit me like a wave crashing over me. She gave me purpose. You gave me permission. Neither of you will be forgotten. I held the letter in my hands for what felt like an eternity, unable to speak, unable to move. I could feel my fingers trembling as I read those words again. The weight of them, the meaning behind them. It was all too much. Too much for me to process, and yet it made everything feel so real, so raw. Jeremiah had never asked for anything. He didn't want my approval or my permission. He had simply been there, in that moment, when I couldn't be. He had been the one who gave my daughter what she needed when I wasn't sure how to give it. He had been the one who saw her, not as a patient, not as a project, but as a person. He had given her purpose. And in doing so, he had given me permission to open up in ways I had long buried. The words felt like a quiet admission of everything that had happened between us. A final acknowledgement of what could never be, but had nonetheless been shared. I folded the letter carefully, as though it were a fragile thing, a secret, a memory, and I placed it in my jacket pocket, near my heart. It felt right, in a way, keeping it close to me. Because despite everything, despite walking away and telling myself it was for the best, there was a part of me that would always carry that moment, that connection. I hadn't expected this. A letter, a simple line, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that I wasn't alone in this, that what had happened, what we had shared, had meant something, even if it was brief, even if it was fleeting. I smiled, though it was a bittersweet smile. It wasn't the smile of someone who had found peace, not yet. But it was the smile of someone who finally understood that no matter how far we run or how many decisions we make to move forward, some things, some people, will never be forgotten. And as I sat there, holding the letter close, I realized that maybe, just maybe, that was enough. She gave me purpose. You gave me permission. Neither of you will be forgotten. And so, we weren't. Not truly. Not in his heart. Not in mine. The story didn't have a clear ending. It didn't have closure in the way I had hoped. But maybe it wasn't supposed to. Some connections, no matter how brief, no matter how complicated, can't be forgotten. And maybe, in the end, that's what makes them real. Some people don't change your life with grand gestures. They do it with gentle steps beside you, with moments so quiet, so tender, that you don't even realize they've left their mark until long after they're gone. Jeremiah didn't come into my life with fireworks or dramatic confessions. No, he was just there, steady, present, giving my daughter something I couldn't. And in doing that, he gave me something too. Something I never knew I needed until it was there. The kind of connection that shakes you to your core, even when you don't fully understand it. But was I wrong to feel so deeply for him? Was it just admiration, as I told myself? Or was it something else? Something deeper, more complicated, more human. A need, a yearning for connection, for someone to see me not as a billionaire, not as a distant father, but as a man who could still feel, still care. I kept asking myself, was it wrong to feel this way for a stranger? Or was it simply human? Were we not all searching for a connection, no matter how unexpected, no matter how fleeting? I made a choice. I thought I was doing the right thing by walking away, by putting distance between us. But now, looking back, I wonder, did I do the right thing? Or did I just walk away from the one thing that might have finally made me feel whole again? But then again, what was I supposed to do? He was a mechanic. He didn't fit the mold of what I had been taught to seek in life. He wasn't part of my world. And yet, there was a part of me that knew. The world I had built, the life I had created, wasn't the whole picture. Jeremiah had shown me that. So, was it admiration? Was it falling? Or was it just the need for something real in a life full of false expectations? I don't know. I don't think I ever will. But maybe that's the point. Some moments in life aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be felt. And for all the confusion, for all the moral struggle, for all the decisions that didn't feel like decisions at all, the truth is, I felt something real. And isn't that what matters in the end? Was the father emotionally falling for Jeremiah, or was it just deep admiration? Did he do the right thing by walking away, or was there something more he could have done? What would you have done? If stories like this make you feel something real, something raw, something you can't quite explain, I invite you to subscribe to Mr. Alex Stories. We walk the emotional line others won't touch. Together, we'll feel the stories that make us human.